Rivers podcast for Wednesday, August 14th. I am your host, Ed Troop. Glad you could join us here on Oneberg, on our Facebook page, on our YouTube page, or maybe you're listening on our Spotify page here today. Hope everybody's doing well. We are in the middle part of August, and if you're in southwestern Pennsylvania, you've noticed in the last week a little bit of a change in the air. That's right. The evenings are getting a little bit earlier. There's a crisp, cool air, and with that, high school football season is almost here. It's right around the corner. Hard to believe the start to the 2024 WPIAL high school football season will be next Friday with week 0 games, followed by the following Friday on the 30th for week 1 games. So joining us to talk about that and more is Mike White from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He is our WPIAL Insider. Hello, Mike. How you doing?
How are you, Ed? Thanks for having me.
Very good, Mike. Hey, you've been at this for a long time. Why don't you tell everybody how many years now?
Well, if I must, I started at the Post-Gazette. My first job that I did down there was address envelopes to athletic directors in WPIAL. And then the week after that, just took scores and worked there part-time all through college. So if you count the years of part-time in college, this would be about 44 years. So, and they hired me full-time when I got out in 1984 and been there ever since.
Oh, man, that is a long time. But one of the cool things with that, I know this will be my 26th season covering WPIAL football and basketball this upcoming school year. And, you know, as you stack up these years, one of the cool things is reflection. And I want to get to that a little bit later in the podcast, especially with you, somebody that's been, you know, at this for 44 years. You've seen some incredible athletes come through southwestern Pennsylvania. So I want to get your thoughts on that a little bit later. But before that, let's start with the 2024 season. As I said, just next Friday, August 23rd, we'll start the week 0 games that, of course, are optional for high school football programs to participate in. Some do, some don't. Some elect to have that second scrimmage next weekend and then get ready for week 1, which is August 30th in the WPIAL high school football season. But what's the top storyline you think might going into this upcoming football season across southwestern Pennsylvania?
Well, and I'd probably say it's a top storyline that has been ongoing probably for months and has many tentacles to it. It'd probably be the Aliquippa football team situation. You know, back when go back to February or January when the competitive balance rule from the PIAA would bump them up from 4A to 5A. They appealed it, they didn't win, and now PIAA said, no, you got to go to 5A. They took the PIAA to court. That was in April and May. I sat through those hearings and they won. A judge gave them a preliminary injunction to stay in 4A. PIAA appealed that to another judge in another court in July. And the court upheld for Aliquippa, though. So they will stay in 4A. However, it is only, according to the judge's ruling in Beaver County, it's on the court docket only for 1 year. So the question is, what about next year? We're going to have to go through this again because the PIAA realigns every 2 years. So if they would have been in 5A, they would have been there for 2 years. And with this injunction, it says on there only for 1 year. Now, so will they have to get it again next year? I don't know if we have to go through it. And, you know, they've got really at their own level, one of the greatest programs probably in the country as far as the players produced, 3 Hall of Famers. And, you know, along with that going up, there was this issue of they got a number of transfers, 6 of them, I believe, all eligible for the regular season except one of them. And but a couple of them are ineligible for the postseason. And a couple of them are high-profile transfers. Larry Moon might be the most heavily recruited sophomore in WPIAL. He's a defensive back. Davion Taylor committed to West Virginia. It's a crazy story with him. He transferred to Aliquippa in the spring. I was attending Aliquippa classes and going there, and preseason football in June and July, and then at some point in late July or August, or some point in July, he went back to Bishop Canevin. Never enrolled, according to Aliquippa, but he was attending their preseason practices. But last week, he's back at Aliquippa, and confirmed by their AD, he's there now. So you put all that together, and they're going to have a really good team. They've got a guy who might end up as the second leading rusher at WPIAL, Tyke Hayes. So you put all that so proper together with the type of team they may have, and I'd say they're probably the top storyline.
And just to add to that, Mike Warfield steps down as head coach.
Get that, yes.
I mean, that just adds a whole nother element to this storyline going on up in Aliquippa. But, Warfield, steps down at, what was that, maybe a month or two ago, still active in the program with the boosters, but taking some time off there with Aliquippa. Mike, what's your opinion on the situation? Did the courts get this right with Aliquippa? Do you think they should be in 4A or should they be in 5A? It seems like the community is very mixed out there. A lot of people look at it and say, hey, look, this is a 1A school playing all the way up because they've had so much success. And others say, no, listen, they've had that success. They should be bumped up each time because they keep getting better. And then there's this whole other argument of the PIAA and out in central Pennsylvania, northern Cambria, and some of these other schools that have success year after year after year, and they don't have to move up. Well, what's your opinion? Did the courts get this right? Do you think they should be in 4A, 5A, or somewhere else?
Well, honestly, Ed, it's a mess. The rule was put in 4 or 5 years ago, and really, it was maybe to keep the people complaining about private Catholic schools getting all kind of players, to maybe quell them a little bit. I don't think that it's done that. I don't know if it's done what the rule was intended to do. I think there should be something. Aliquippa, when they see it, I say there's so many tentacles to this. Right. Yeah, but he says they're only Class A enrollment. Well, for this cycle, they would be 2A, but they chose to play up on their own in 3A. That was years ago, okay? But they chose to play up in 3A before they knew this rule would be in. So would they have chosen to play in 3A if they knew this rule would be in? I don't know, but they did choose to play in 3A. I don't think if my own personal opinion is if you choose to play up in class, there should be something in the PIA rules that you can't be bumped up maybe more than one class. In other words, Aliquippa chose to play up in 3A. They should not be bumped up more than 4A. That's my opinion. However, the rule is there. Right. And, I'm not saying the rule shouldn't be changed. Their thing is it's prejudice against areas like Aliquippa and things. But there's two parts of the rule: success and transfers. It just Aliquippa's transfers last 2 years. Some of them never even got in hardly. That's. But if he's a transfer, what do you say? Do you say, well, if he plays a quarter, it's really a screwed up situation. And I know I'm talking here, but I don't think they should be bumped up to 5A. But the thing is, my thing is like, their contention that they don't have, enough players, enough depth. Well, they had 55 players on their roster last year. That's very comparable to a number of 5A teams. This thing of, health and safety. Right. I don't know. They got a lot of players that are pretty good. I understand, if you don't have as many numbers, you have more kids going both ways. But there's a number of other schools playing 5A football that have probably half of their starters going both ways. So, that part, I just don't know if you consider say, well, health and safety should be that. Well, but if you look at them, I don't know if that's. I just don't. know if that's the argument. I think the argument is, you know what, if you play up in class, you should only be bumped up one more class at the most. And then, whatever. And I understand people complain about Southern Columbia. How come they got never moved up? Well, the other component of this rule is success in transfers. And you have to have 3 transfers over 2 years. And Southern Columbia has claimed, and with their rosters, has not had 3 transfers over 2 years. Now, you can say that's not right. Well, then you need to change the rule. But if that's the rule that's in place right now. So, that's why Southern Columbia, everybody, how come they were never moved up? Well, they say they don't have the transfers, and their rosters say that they don't. So that's why they weren't moved up. But it's just a whole, I think the rule really needs either thrown out or really reworked. Bottom line is no, I don't think Aliquippa should be made to go up to 5A, but the rule is there, so get him to change the rule.
Right. Mike, you brought up a point just a little bit ago as well, and I want to get your opinion on that as well. The other big debate that happens in high school athletics, especially recently, has been private schools versus public schools and whether those two should be separated. I know you're a big basketball guy too. I know you coach and highly involved there as well. What's your opinion there, especially on the basketball end of things, the private schools versus the public school debate?
Well, it's been the same for a while. I'm not saying even that the private schools do anything wrong, but I just don't know how anybody could say it's an even playing field, because when public schools, if they get a transfer, the kid has to physically move, whereas Catholic schools, charter schools, they get a lot of kids that transfer in, and there's kids that transfer into public schools too, and they don't have to move. And it's all, for anybody to say that's you're playing on the same level playing field, I don't think that's right. And I'll just use, for example, I was over McKees or Woodland Hills' practice football last week, and their AD told me they have 3 ninth grade basketball players coming in. This is what he told me, and they're pretty good. 2 of them would have, if they didn't start, played a lot of varsity, but all 3 of them left to go to Lincoln Park. 3 of them. So that's a perfect example of, and they don't have to move. Whereas I'm just going to make up a school. Let's say Beaver Falls. If there's kids, if they wanted them kids, they would have to move in the Beaver Falls district. I mean, so, it's really, you can restock with players. And now I know there are small Catholic schools and private schools that, they don't win a lot. But when you see, Ralph Blundo said it best, I think, the Newcastle coach years ago, and he really is a big proponent of this. Something needs to be changing. The PIAA director, Bob Lombardi, made a couple comments about teams from WPIAL that were complaining we're in state championships, and maybe they just need to get better. Maybe it's coaching. Maybe they need to coach better. And that really struck a nerve with a lot of people. And Bob is, I think he gets criticized a lot of times unfairly, but that struck a nerve with a lot of people. And Ralph had a conversation with Bob that he told me about that. And they had just played in the state championship against Imhotep Charter, and which is in Philadelphia and gets players from everywhere. I mean, and St. Joe's Prep, when I looked at Archbishop Wood School website a few years ago from Philadelphia. They get players, they get students from, it was like 130 zip codes. Okay. And that's on their website. Now you're going to tell me that's like an even playing field with public schools? And I'm not saying even these private and Catholic and charter schools are doing anything wrong. I'm not even saying they're recruiting, but it is an advantage. Well, anyway, Ralph said to the PIAA director, Bob Lombardi, he said, Mr. Lombardi, when we were playing in Motep Charter, and my biggest kid was 6'3" and he got in foul trouble, and they have 3 kids 6'8" on their team, and they always have 3 kids 6'8" on their team. When my 6'3" kid got in foul trouble, I looked on the bench to look for my 6'8" kid. He wasn't there, and he's never been there. But Imhotep Charter has them all the time. And I compare, I'm being long-winded here, but
it's crazy.
I've compared it to, if, let's say, Pitt and Penn State. Let's say if Pitt had a rule where they could only take players from the state of Pennsylvania, okay? And Penn State could take players, scholarship players from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Florida, Georgia, 6 different states. Do you think that would fly? And essentially, that's what this is. And
not at all. No way, right?
And I've go back and done stories. When the Catholic schools joined the PIAA and the WPIAL in the 70s, they had boundaries. If you lived in the South Hills, you went to South Hills Catholic, which is now Seton LaSalle. If you lived in the West, you went to Canton. If you lived in the East, you went to Central Catholic. If you lived in the South, maybe, or Sarah. They had boundaries, and that's why they let them in. But there are no boundaries anymore. I mean, heck, St. Joe's Prep has players from other states. So it isn't now what it was designed to be in the 70s. And that's one of the big things that I think should be considered. When they came in, they had boundaries and okay, but now they don't have to take students. Now they don't have any boundaries. They can take them from everywhere. And I understand that Catholic schools are really hurting for, enrollments that many of them have gone way down, especially there's very few compared to years ago, grade schools, Catholic grade schools. But I understand they need students, but it's not the same playing field. And that's the big thing, that a lot of coaches complain about.
I think there's a lot of people out there, Mike, that agree with you on that. And, you bring up St. Joe's Prep, and I know they're in the Philly area, but when you look at their rosters, you see kids from New Jersey, sometimes even New York on there. So as you said, they're winning Pennsylvania state championships, and there's guys on those rosters that aren't even in the state of Pennsylvania. So point well taken there. Hey, Mike, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk to you a little bit about the 2024 season that is starting for high school football here in southwestern Pennsylvania. I want to go through each classification with you and just get your thoughts on who you think is the favorite going into the season and any other thoughts there. In Class 6A last year, North Allegheny, the reigning champ, as the number 2 seed, defeats Central Catholic, who was the 1 seed from a year ago. Of course, every year it seems like we're just talking about North Allegheny and Central Catholic when you talk about 6A ball. But there was some movement with the realignment this season. 6A got a couple more teams, but I don't know, man. I'm interested to get your opinion. I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. I feel like North Allegheny and Central Catholic still are the top dogs in 6A.
Oh, no doubt. And 9 out of 10 years, we're going to be saying the same thing. The
right.
6A way it is. It's those 2 teams. To me, it's not anybody's fault in WPIAL, but to me, 6A is boring because they had 5 teams for the last few years. Now they have 7, but they're all one conference, and there's not even 2 conferences. Well, that you could say, well, I wonder what this team would do against that team if they get to the championship. And I don't know. It's not WPIAL's fault. It's not any of the school's fault. But to me, it's boring. And Central and North Allegheny are going to be the top 2 schools again. Seneca's going to be better than they were. And, Mount Lebanon, Greg Perry's a new coach. You're going to get a team here and there, they'll pop up and maybe get to the championship. That's not Central North Allegheny. But I'm going to tell you, Central lost a lot of really good players. But I'll tell you what, they got a lot of really good players back that are sophomores, juniors, seniors, Power 5 conference guys. They're still really good. And you know what? North Allegheny lost their quarterback, who was really good, Logan Kushner, and lost some other kids, Kyra Boyd, Tyree Aloalo. But they are still going to be very good also. Heck, they got a player going to Alabama. We have a player in the WPIAL going to Alabama, but he's a kicker. Peter Natero, kicker from North Allegheny, going to Alabama. He's committed there, offer a scholarship. probably has to be one of the best kickers we've had here in a while. But I think it's kind of interesting. We have a SEC player going to Alabama. We don't get many of them, and he's a kicker.
There you go. A kicker on his way down south to a big program like Alabama here from southwestern Pennsylvania. Maybe Joe Namath was the last big name to go to Alabama from southwestern Pennsylvania, right?
Well, Robert Foster from Central Valley, a receiver, he went to Alabama. And there have been a couple others, but Joe Willie would be the biggest name, yes.
That was an easy one. That was a layup for me to come back at you with that one, Mike. Hey, let's move on to 5A. Peters Township, of course, amazing season last year. Defeats Pine Richland in the championship game, went undefeated. Really just a strong program that Peters Township has put together here in the last couple years and really trending in the right direction. But Pine Richland's right there as well. Did you see any other movement in 5A this year? And will Peters be the team to beat again?
Well, I think 5A and 4A are definitely, without a doubt, the best classifications in WPIAL. 5A especially because of the depth of quality teams that I think Peters Township they're going to be our number one ranked team in 5A. They have to be number one going into the year because just because they're the defending champs, but they are the defending champs. And they've got about 5 or 6 starters back on both sides of the ball, but they lost some really good players, but they have some really good ones back. Mickey Vaccarella, linebacker, tight end, wide receiver, is committed to Stanford. Reston Lohman is another junior linebacker who's going to be a Division I kid next year. Their quarterback, Nolan DeLucia, threw for the most yards last year ever by a WPIAL sophomore, 3,138. He's only a junior. He's back. They have some other good players that maybe you do not know about. I got to shout out TJ Plack, what he's done there, the job he's done there. That program never did anything before he got there.
Right.
And he's been beat WPL championships. He's won. Last year, they won one for the first time. I think they're the team to beat, but they're not a prohibitive favorite. I think you got to look at, teams like Penn Trafford, Tassa Whipple, the leading rusher back, Ben Grabowski, the second leading rusher back. They got a lot of kids back. Pine Richland I think it's the offensive side of the ball, only has a few starters back, but they've got some new kids stepping up that'll be good. Woodland Hills, is this the year they return to glory? They got a number of kids back. They were pretty good last year, didn't make the playoffs. Scoop Smith, I think, is one of my favorite players in WPIAL. The fastest player in the WPIAL. And Ed, I've seen he's a WPIAL AAA 100-meter champ, and he can fly. I would say, I saw him play basketball last year. I would say in all my years, he might be the fastest basketball player I've seen in WPIAL. Wow. I didn't say the best. I said the fastest. Going up and down the court. And no, he doesn't have a ton of skills, but he did average 18 a game. And he's really an exciting player to watch. And they've got other kids back, Cam Walter, Zaire Moore. Pine Richland will still be good, but a Gateway. I think Gateway, not Brad Birch anymore. A lot of people forgot about them. They're going to be good. Bethel Park, although they lost their top receiver, Ryan Peters, to an injury, they're going to be good. Upper St. Clair. The sleeper team, I think, is Latrobe. They move up from 4A. They never won a playoff game since 1968. They won one 2 years ago. They won another one last year, and they gave Aliquippa a really good game in the quarterfinals. They have a lot of kids back. Ron Prady's done a great job, third-year coach there. Alex Tash is one of the best WPIAL players. He's going to Penn State, a linebacker. Man, he looks the part. I was at their camp last week. Really good. Their quarterback, John Wetzel, was 1,000 guy last year. He's going to Marshall. Watch them. I think they have to prove themselves, but they could be pretty good.
Yeah, I saw your article recently on the Post-Gazette. You ranked your top 10 prospects, college prospects going in to the season back there in June. And you had 2 Wildcats in your top 10 that you just mentioned there, Mike. So that type of talent, as you said, maybe this is the year that Latrobe gets here. You mentioned Woodland Hills too, and there's another distinguished program for so long, but has struggled, recently, trying to get back on track as well. In 4A, of course, we talked about Aliquippa. Bell Vernon moves up from 3A. The back-to-back WPIAL and state champs in 3A move up back to 4A, and we'll be there with Aliquippa, Thomas Jefferson, McKeesport. 4A is loaded as well, just like 5A, right?
Yeah, I said I think 5A and 4 are definitely the best classifications of WPL as far as depth of quality teams. I think Aliquippa has to be number one. I mean,
Right.
They have their own locker room, I think, at Acrisure Stadium now. They've been there so many times. But Tyke Hayes could end up as a second leading rusher at WPIAL. I don't think he needs well over 3,000 yards to catch Russell Shell. But Penn State guy, I think they're definitely the number one team. But we really had a lot of trouble, Ed, picking a top 5 in here. In 5A, because I think we left out some teams that are definitely top 5 worthy, but you got to pick 5. Bell Vernon, they don't have Quentin Martin. They don't have Braden Lowe, their quarterback. Martin's at Penn State. They lost a lot of guys, but they probably have half their starters back, and they've got some good players, some really good players back.
Good coaching too.
McKeesport is, I think, a top 3 team going into the season. Keeman Spell just committed to Penn State as a sophomore, a running back, defensive back. Andrew Boyd, their leading rushers back from last year. They're run that flex bone. They're always good. You got to look at, Bell Vernon. I said Thomas Jefferson. They don't have a lot of starters back, but I think they're still going to be pretty good. Shep Turk committed to Pitt. Their quarterback Luke Costco is really good. He's committed to Cincinnati for baseball. West Allegheny. Don't forget about Mars. A lot of kids back. Maybe the best pass catch combination WPIL in Luke Goodworth and Gabe Hine. And don't forget, we ended up not putting Montour in the top 5, even though they have a lot of players back, because a big replacement for Jake Whoop, their quarterback, who did everything for them. But I could see them going really far, Ed. They're really good. But we had to pick somebody not in there. They're a top 5 team. And then you got people like Wes Mifflin, who has Armin Hill, who rushed well over 1,000 yards last year as a freshman. 4A is really good. It's tough to pick a top 5.
Right. And we had Matt Humbert, the Bell Vernon coach, on our program earlier this spring. And he said it just come out, actually, that they were going to open up in week 1 at Aliquippa. And he just kind of had a chuckle on his face that he said, we were blessed to be the back-to-back state champs moving up to 4A and now have to go to Aliquippa in week 1. But he said he was excited for that challenge. That's going to be a heck of a week 1 matchup, Bell Vernon at Aliquippa. So that's 6A, 5A, 4A. Mike, why don't you walk us through 3A, 2A, 1A? Of course, we already talked about Bell Vernon and 3A moving up to 4A. Avonworth, back-to-back years, making it to Acrisure Stadium, but losing to Bell Vernon in 3A. 2A, Beaver Falls was a big story last year, the 10th seed, and they upset Steel Valley in the championship game to win the WPIAL championship. And Fort Cherry, 1A, I'm in Cannon Mac, but I'm right next door to Fort Cherry, and let me tell you, the McDonald community fired up last year and fired up this year too about that Fort Cherry Ranger football team. That program also on the rise.
Well, in 3A, I think the story there is it's not a great classification as far as quality of depth of quality teams, but I really think the top 3 teams going into the year are all in one conference, the Western Hills, and I'm talking about Central Valley. They will be our number 1 team. Avonworth, they were in the championship the last 2 years. And my sleeper team I'm telling you, they were 9-3 last year. Not a lot of people talk about it. Beaver. 2 receivers going to FCS schools. Brady Mayo's going to Bucknell. Amari Jackson is going to Villanova. Their leading rusher, 1,000-yard rushers back. Well, on Kane, their quarterback is back. They have 11 starters back on offense, Ed. And they were from a team that was 9-3 and gave some good teams battles last year. They are going to be good. And they're in the same conference with Avonworth and Beaver, or Central Valley. So, and Central Valley opens the season at Montour. Great game, first night of the year. So, the rest of 3A, North Catholic, I think, will be better than they were. Elizabeth Ford has really come on the last few years. I think they'll still be pretty good. But, how good will Monty Christian be? They have Deshaun Burnett going to Penn State. David Davis has power conference offers. But I really think going into the year, the top 3 teams are in that Western Hills Conference. Going down to 2A, I hate to cap down, but I think 2A is the weakest classification, WPIL. I think Steel Valley has to be the number 1 team going into the season. Been in a championship game the last 2 years. They've got the Barksdale brothers back, but one of them, Duran, who's a junior with Division I offers, he will not play at least in the first game, maybe the second. I just talked to him the other, saw him at a media event for KDKA, but he's still nursing, coming back from a leg injury or knee injury. So, but his brother Donald Barksdale was the leading rusher, and
Right.
I think he'll be the number one team. Beaver Falls has been a championship last 4 years, but they have like 3 starters back and a new coach. And so, the rest of this classification, Washington will always be good. Seton LaSalle is a team to watch. And they won a game 2 years ago, much better last year. They've got some kids. They got one of the best sophomores, WPIAL, Khalil Taylor, has Division I offers, major college offers. I think they're a sleeper team. Class A, yeah, Fort Cherry definitely has to be the number one team going in. Matt Sig, the quarterback, a number of big-time offers, a 3-sport guy, and, has done wonders for it. But they are not just Matt Sig. They have some other kids back, but they lost some. So they have some things to prove, I think. But with Sig, he's the X factor. You put him on any team, especially at the lower levels, and it's going to take them up, way up. I don't think anybody has anybody like him. Clairton has almost every starter back, almost everyone, and they're always good. You look at the rest of single A, Southside made it to the finals last year. I think they'll still be pretty decent, but I think going into the year, Clairton and Fort Cherry would be the number one teams.
You are watching and listening to the Three Rivers podcast. I am your host, Ed Troop. I got the WPIAL Insider, Mike White from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, join us. Mike, we only have a few more minutes with you, and we just previewed the upcoming season in each classification. We talked about Aliquippa. We talked about a lot of things here this morning, but I want to get your thoughts. 44 years covering the WPIAL. I know we could probably talk for the next 2 hours about this, but want to put you on the spot. Who is some of the top athletes that you've seen during that time? And I don't want to make it a big, broad question because you can go sport by sport. Since we're talking football and football's here, it's like I said at the top of the podcast, right? It's getting colder out now. The days are getting a little bit shorter in the evenings. We know that Friday Night Lights is just around the corner. So let's just talk specifically about football over the course of 44 years. Some of your top athletes that you've covered.
Okay, I'm going to go back and mention one other team. We mentioned WPIL, but I think they need mention is the City League in Westinghouse.
Oh, yeah, of course.
They've been in the state championship in 2A the last 2 years, and they moved down to single A this year, and they have a lot of kids back, and they're going to be really good. I actually think they're the favorite to win the state championship in single A. And their coach I think he is a generation type coach. I think what he's done there is absolutely remarkable. Dante Green, the values he instills in those kids and what he's done for those kids. And I just, wanted to mention them. As far as best players, I get asked this question a lot. If I just go the ones I've seen, I saw Dan Marino in 1978. But I was a high school junior, and I don't think I appreciated really how good he was. So, I would say from 1980 on, okay? I would say the best guys. Well, I would say the two best here. Here are my two best: LeVar Arrington and Terrell Pryor. LeVar was phenomenal athlete. Terrell Pryor, phenomenal athlete. And when Terrell was a senior in that, I said he might be the best player I've seen now. And I used to say, and I have a good relationship with LeVar. We still stay in touch. And I saw LeVar about a year later, and he said to me, "I heard you said Terrell Pryor was the best player you've seen. What happened to me?" And I said, "Well," and you know what, Ed, a lot of times, rightly or wrongly, what a player does after high school determines their legacy,
sure,
rightly or wrongly. And I think LeVar, what he did after high school, was greater than Terrell Pryor. So I'm going to go LeVar as my, number one player since 1980. But Pryor would be up there. Who else probably in my top five? Brian Davis at Washington High School, a 1985 graduate. Phenomenal athlete. People don't know he's Parade Magazine's back when Parade was the thing, the national player of the year. And I know Scouting Service had him as the number one player in the country as a senior. As a running back, he was phenomenal. I think he averages almost 10 yards a carry for his career. Phenomenal athlete. Was a state champion in basketball. He played center at 5'10". My goodness. And he was a state champion at track. And he was phenomenal. He went to Pitt, showed flashes of greatness as a freshman against Boston College and West Virginia, but had some problems with grades and other things and never played again. Sad story. Some of the other better ones, I'm going to throw a name in the past too. Major Harris. As a he was the dual threat quarterback before the dual threat quarterback at Brashear. And he almost won a Heisman Trophy at West Virginia. Unbelievable athlete with the things he could do on the football field. Brandon Short deserves to be up there. A linebacker, McKeesport. He's one of the best I saw. And as far as just a player, Tyler Palko, phenomenal two-way player. I think people forget about how good he was. And a guy, talk about legacies of what they do at their high school. And his was hurt some by what happened last year. But I'm telling you right now, as a quarterback and as a high school player, since 1980, there was nobody better than Phil Jerkovic at Pine Ridgeland. His numbers, he was recruited heavily. He was a great athlete, really good basketball player, and had some really good years at Boston College. But I don't know what happened. And last year was just a shame, really, to me, what happened at Pitt. But I'm telling you, Ed, as a quarterback, and I know they were coaching. Art Walker, after he lost him the second time, Jerkovic's senior year, said he might be the best quarterback he's seen since Marino. He reminds you of Dan Marino. So those would be my top two would be LeVar and Terrell Pryor.
So on my end, in 25 years, my top two, Steve Breston from Woodland Hills, and of course, Darrell Rivas. Darrell Rivas from Aliquippa. But Breston, for me, covered him several times, was just so fast and multi-sport athlete. And you mentioned Terrell Pryor too, Mike. Great basketball player too, right? I mean, he was tremendous on the basketball court.
Scored 2,000 points. I think he was back then. He was the first player ever in the history of Pennsylvania. One other guy has done it since, to run for 4,000 career yards and pass for 4,000 career yards. A guy from Eastern PA has done it since. He did 5,000 and 5,000. Matt Sig's probably going to do that too. And he scored 2,000 points in basketball. Who does that? You brought him up. To me, Steve Breston was the most exciting player I've seen in WPIAL. I didn't say the best. I said he was the most exciting.
Yeah, Breston was awesome at Woody High, and like I said, Rivas up at Aliquippa too was another big name as well. But Terrell Pryor, Jeanette, so many good ones, Mike. Like I said, we could probably spend the next 2 hours just talking football, and then another 2 hours talking basketball and baseball and even softball. I mean, we've had some really great athletes here in Southwestern Pennsylvania that both of us and many more have been blessed to cover over the years.
Ed, I got to bring up, I'll say this real fast.
Yeah.
Darrell had the greatest 2 days of any high school athlete I've ever seen. I take that back. 3 days.
Okay.
In a 3 period, the state championship in football was postponed because of snow. They played it on a Sunday. He had, if not the greatest, one of the greatest state championship performances in PIAA history. He scored 5 touchdowns 3 different ways, completed a pass, returned a blocked extra point for a touchdown, had an interception. I think he had around 100 yards rushing. Anyway, one of the greatest performances ever in PIAA championship history. And I don't think people realize how hard this is to do. 2 nights later, about 50 hours later, 52, played a basketball game with 1 day of shooting practice against rival Beaver Falls and scored 38 points.
Wow.
2 days later. Now, you play a state championship football game, you know you're going to get banged up and hit pretty much, especially with he did everything. And to come back 2 days later and to do that on the basketball court, wow. I was fortunate enough. I don't think a lot of people did, but I was one of the fortunate ones who was at both of those games. So I saw it up close in person. Amazing 3 days, I think, ever by a WPIAL athlete.
Yeah, I'm not sure that'll ever get matched. Maybe at Fort Cherry, who knows? But with a sling, but it's wow, what a great story. Hey, Mike, we appreciate you coming on the podcast this morning. I know you got to run. You're off to Westinghouse, right? To a camp.
Yeah, they have camp up at Camp Conaquee, way up past Zillionople, out in the middle of nowhere. So the city kids are out in the middle of nowhere, staying cabins. I think it's an interesting story. So I'm going to go up and see them.
Oh, enjoy, my friend, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you at one or two high school venues throughout this upcoming fall.
All right, Eddie. Thank you, bud. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
All right, that's Mike White, our WPIAL Insider from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joining us on the podcast here this morning. Make sure you tune in next week. We're going to have another Pittsburgh Post-Gazette writer. Ray Fittipaldo will be on the show next Wednesday to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, the training camp, and the upcoming 2024 season for the Steelers. So that's going to do it for our podcast here for Wednesday, August 14th, right here on Oneburg's Facebook channel, Oneburg YouTube, and on our Spotify channel. Have a great day, everyone.